Now we go to Bethany Little. Bethany carries on her shoulders the burden of having to speak from the policy world. But let me just frame up a question for Bethany. And I realize you're speaking alone. You don't have a comrade with you, so you have to give us all of the thoughts from the policy world. But it seems like if this is where what the research shows, it shows all sorts of problems with value added. It shows that there should be a much more sophisticated way of evaluating teachers than we have today. And yet, the pressures in the policy world are towards use of test scores, use of value added, not only in teacher evaluation, but value added is considered a major reform of the NCLB accountability system, using value added instead of the system we have today. But if the research is correct, there's all sorts of problems with this approach. So how should the policymakers deal with this? Will this research have an effect on policy? If it does, what kind of effect will it have? What's the direction of using test scores more and more for accountability, but also for evaluation? So we'll turn now to Bethany to answer all these questions.
I don't even remember all those questions, Jack, much less answer them all. Good morning, and thank you for having me here. Just a quick comment in case there are any reporters or bloggers in the room. Can you please consider my comments today to be on background? And if anybody wants specific quotes, happy to work out that later. It's really an honor to be sitting up here with these folks. I have read many of these papers. I've been learning about these issues from Linda for years, and it's a lot of really helpful and interesting information that has actually already had a significant impact, I would say, on the policy conversation that we've been having. I am sorry that my colleague Lindsay isn't here, in part because we've been working so closely together on these policies. I think you would hear a lot of agreement between us on the way we're looking at some of this, which is a rare pleasure in Washington these days. So too bad we can't treat you to that. Before I get into kind of the specifics about where we might want to go with policy, I want to just bear with me. I'm the mom of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I adore my children, so can't resist an anecdote, and this is a true one. I came home on Monday night, and my 3-year-old ran up and big hug, and he suddenly, kind of slumped in my arms, and I thought, my God, he feels a little hot to me. And so he was really kind of lethargic, and he wanted to snuggle a lot, and I realized I think he has a fever. So we have one of those thermometers that you stick in the kid's ear. So I stuck it in his ear, and it came out as 101.7. And I always do it twice, so I stuck it in this ear, and it came out as 101.2. Over the next 24 hours, and frankly, many, many more times since then, I've been sticking my thermometer in his ear, and I'm not sure it's ever come out with the same number twice, but it's always shown that he has a fever, and in fact, he has croup. So he definitely has a fever. And when we think about value added, I think from a policy perspective, we're thinking about it a little bit as that thermometer. It's not perfect. It does vary. And on its own, I'm not sure it would be all that useful to me. But when added to the fact that I could feel that he was hot, that he was lethargic, that he has a bad cough, it gave me some important information. And I wouldn't be much of a mom if I hadn't given him some ibuprofen to see if I couldn't help bring that fever down. And I think from our perspective, we want to think of value added as a part of that suite of things that could be a policy and practice tool. And I emphasize the practice part because from a policy perspective, when we're looking at the questions of value added and teacher evaluation, which are not the same thing, and I want to emphasize we do not think they're the same thing, we want to think about how do we use those first and foremost as opportunities to improve teaching and practice. I think very often we quickly seem to descend into conversations about who can be fired and who can be given bonuses. And I think that's not where we, in a policy level, and I can say in a bipartisan Senate approach to these policies, that is not where we've started the conversation. We have, in fact, started the conversation in what is it that we know that matters, what is it we know that needs improvement, and how is it we can help support that in states and districts across the country. I'll tell you some of the conclusions we've come to. We know that that teacher quality matters. We know that it matters enormously. Does it overcome everything? We know that it doesn't. but we do know that it can make a huge difference for students based on all of the evidence that some of these folks have been bringing us for a long time. We also know that current teacher evaluation systems in many cases, and I would venture to say in the majority of cases, are failing both teachers and students. They are not giving us information about teachers that is useful to either policymakers, principals, leaders who are trying to improve student achievement, nor to the teachers themselves who are trying to improve their own craft. I was listening to your presentation about the frustrations folks had with EVAS. I have heard that over and over again from every teacher I have ever spoken to about their teacher evaluation system, except for teachers who are on TAP, I should say. You hear it everywhere. It's not about EVAS. In general, teacher evaluation systems are not helping teachers get the information they want. They are not connected deeply to understandings of professional development, to collaboration, to opportunities for improvement in ways that they should be designed to be used. And so while I don't doubt that that's a flaw of EVAS, I would also venture to say it's a flaw of most teacher evaluation. We know that student achievement does matter. That at the heart of the conversation, if we're not asking whether or not the students are learning, we are actually failing to ask the right question. And I appreciate a lot of what Linda laid out, and I think we need to use that. I think that needs to be a significant part of the policy conversation. But one thing I've learned over years of policy making here is that mandating process is often not a great way to go, especially from the federal level, which I recognize is not what you were suggesting. What you're suggesting is different, but it is important to understand. You could give me all the mechanics of how to surf in like 10 easy steps, but if I have terrible balance and don't know how to swim, I'm not gonna be a good surfer, and it doesn't matter if I follow your 10 easy steps. At the end of the day, we have to ask the question, are the students learning what they need to know? I used to get really frustrated with people who'd come talk to me and they would spend their whole time on an anecdote, and now that I have kids, I'm gonna do that again, so bear with me. So my kid had the teacher last year, again, this is a true story, my kid had a teacher last year who was not the most popular kindergarten teacher. It was not the teacher parents asked for. And in the process of that, my son got late onset strabismus, which is commonly called lazy eye, in October of his kindergarten year, and had surgery for it to correct it in February. He spent a significant part of his kindergarten year with double vision. You want to talk about a challenge for a teacher. There's nothing she could do, there's nothing I could do as a parent about this challenge that had been presented to her. And the teacher across the hall, and this is literally true, is the most popular kindergarten teacher. All of the parents want that kindergarten teacher. She babysits on weekends. She comes to the kids' soccer games. Everyone loves her. I talked to a parent who's had 3 kids go through kindergarten, and she said, you know, nobody else will say this, but I love the teacher your son has. All of her kids start first grade reading. Now, that's not true of a lot of the kindergarten teachers here. And in fact, we have one kindergarten teacher who it's patently not his philosophy. None of his kids, no, except for the ones whose parents are kind of pushing them, most of his kids don't start first grade reading, but they're super prepared, and within the first month or 2, they read. They're probably equally good kindergarten teachers. I'm not judging those 2 teachers. I'm saying there are different approaches that can work differently. But the teacher across the hallway, rumor has it in the conversations at school, did not get a high score on impact here in the DC system, which caused such a furor, it contributed to the leaving of the principal in our school. There is such concern and outrage over that question, but I don't know if she's a good teacher. She's popular. She babysits on weekends. She goes to soccer games. At the end of the day, that's not actually the question I'm most interested in asking as a policymaker. What I'm interested in asking is, does she need some professional development on how to help her kids learn to read? That's my first question. Are there other people she could collaborate with who could help her be a better math teacher? Those are the things that we are after in this conversation. So in this area of policy, I try to remember that we should act with bold humility. We need to remember that federal policy will drive a lot, and we need to be bold. We need to take the next steps that will advance the country in as much as we can. But we also need to be extremely humble in recognizing the limitations of the art and science of value added, of assessment. I want to talk about quality of assessment too, because somebody touched on that, and it's hugely important, and of evaluation in general. And we need to remember the limitations of our own ability to impact people's policy and practice on the ground. Us mandating things is not always the best way to drive the best outcome, and we need to be cognizant of that when we make policy. But that said, there is a lot we can do to try to be more supportive, and I do think we can get into the details. I know we want to spend some time talking, but we do need to understand the test quality is going to matter enormously. That random assignment is a funny conversation to have around here. There isn't random assignment. I recognize that. On the other hand, there shouldn't be. The teacher my 6-year-old has this year is known for really being good with squirmy boys. A lot of teachers see that as the kids they don't want in their classroom. She's really good with them. And so when you look at, you made a comment about teachers who go across environments and they should be equally good across environments. I'm not sure that's true. From a policy perspective, there are teachers who actually shouldn't teach in low-income, high-challenge schools. They should teach in schools where teaching is maybe different and can be done within their skill set more easily. I don't think we should think teachers are all the same. It's the whole widget effect conversation that has driven a lot of this. And so anyway, that's a lot of response to your question, Jack, and I'm sure there's more to come.